instead of like formulating a business plan and looking for the right site and sourcing out equipment, we kind of started out with a site first and equipment first, and then had to write the business plan and then come up with the beers and everything else. So we kind of started off on our own path, doing things our own way, and we've kind of done it the same way ever since.
Amanda here, and welcome to entry 56 of our Great Beer Adventure. Once about every month or so, I go on a little road trip to find a number of breweries a little further from home. Recently, I've heard about 3 breweries around Portsmouth. Today, we stay in New Hampshire, but hit up a brewery I am sure a number of you have heard of, Smuttynose Brewing Company. I have had Smuttynose beers plenty of times in the years past, but this was my first chance to actually visit them. It was such a fun time. Let's listen in as JT tells us how Smuttynose got its start.
The Smuttynose origin story, I think, is pretty interesting, and I've been here for 10 years, so if I still find it interesting, it's got to be pretty interesting, right? We actually can trace our roots to the earliest days of craft brewing in New England. Peter Eggleston, who's the co-founder and president of Smuttynose, he was teaching English in Brooklyn in the early 80s, and his sister Janet and her boyfriend at the time were doing, I just heard this detail recently, they were doing merchandise sales for the Jackson Brothers reunion tour, and they came through New York City and had dinner, and Janet was telling Peter about these little restaurants out on the West Coast that were making their own beer, which wasn't really a thing at the time. And they through further conversations, Peter had already been homebrewing at that point, and through further conversations, they decided they would open one of these little restaurants that brewed its own beer, and that was the Northampton Brewery, which opened in Northampton, Massachusetts in 1987. So we trace our roots back to that. Northampton was successful. They decided they wanted to open a second brew pub, so they looked around at a number of spots and settled on downtown Portsmouth, which is the Portsmouth Brewery. I think you guys were there earlier today on this trip. They opened in 1991, and this is in the early 90s when there was like a micro brewing revolution sweeping America. It was sort of that first wave of, or the beginning of the first wave of the big boom. And there was a little craft brewery, well, I guess it was a little microbrewery back then. They weren't craft breweries yet. But they opened up on the outer edge of Portsmouth. It was called the Frank Jones Brewery, and it was named after a brewery that was really big in Portsmouth in the 19th century. They brewed over 100,000 barrels a year at one point. They were exporting like beer to Ireland and the UK. They brewed one of the first American IPAs, actually, which is a fun little stat about the brewing history of Portsmouth. And this little brewery that had opened up went out of business pretty quickly, and Peter went to the bankruptcy auction. They had been open on a small business loan, so there was an auction to recoup some of the fees. And Peter says that he went to sort of see who might end up taking over this brewery, who would be sort of the new kid in town. And he ended up with the assets of it with a couple of other investors. So instead of like formulating a business plan and looking for the right site and sourcing out equipment, we kind of started out with a site first and equipment first, and then had to write the business plan and then come up with the beers and everything else. So we kind of started off on our own path, doing things our own way, and we've kind of done it the same way ever since. We operated on that site on the edge of Portsmouth for, I guess, about 15 or so years. We'll call it 15 years for the sake of the example. And the business went well. We had introduced Finest Kind IPA. We got to the point where we were building extensions to the roof height and expansions off the side of the building to add more fermenters to keep up with growth. So we began looking for the proverbial next brewery. We looked at 2 or 3 different sites. It was actually 3, not 2 or 3. And settled on the site here in Hampton where we're sitting today. It's the Toll Farm. The Toll Farm Road is named for It's a 17-acre parcel of land, and when we bought it, there's a beautiful old barn with 2 carriage houses and a Victorian farmhouse, and a lot of acreage off the back and the side. So we bought the land, worked out a bunch of blueprints and designs, and then we opened the new brewery here. Memorial Day weekend of 2014, we opened to the public. So now we have a brand new headquarters and production facility, which is where we're sitting today. I can proudly tell you that it is certified LEED Gold. We're the second brewery in the U.S. to get LEED Gold certification, and the third industrial building in New Hampshire. So we're pretty proud of that. You have to put forth a lot of extra work and effort to reach that level. You have to make a lot of decisions. Well, you choose to make a lot of decisions to reach that you don't have to make. So we're really happy and proud to have that certification. The farmhouse got moved 85 yards onto a new foundation, and that's now a Hayseed restaurant. And so we're really in sort of the very big second phase of Smuttynose history here at the farm in Hampton.
I completely agree that being LEED certified is an amazing feat.
LEED is an acronym for Leadership in Environmental and Energy Design. And it's the most widely recognized green building standard on the planet. And so it takes everything into account from, there are different criteria for different projects, whether it's new construction, if it's a home, if it's a renovation project, or an adapted use. So each one of those has its own criteria. So based on what your, sort of the scope of what your project is, you have criteria. And for every decision you make, whether it's how your lighting system works, where you source your building materials from, so on and so forth, you get point values for all the things that you do, and it involves reams and reams of documentation. So when the project's all done, it's also interesting because it's an integrated process. Typically, when you design a building, the architects and engineers sit down and build something, and then they sort of pass it off to the construction team, and then they sort of build it. Because of the scope of what LEED wants to achieve, everyone sits down at the table from day one, so that collectively as a team, you find synergies and efficiencies to streamline the design and construction process, instead of having to sort of have a lot of back and forth in a timeline that happens early on. And so what you're left with is a building that has been designed and constructed from really environmentally sustainable means. Like I said, whether it's where the construction materials are from, how many windows you have, which direction they face, what your lighting system is, how tight your building envelope is, to how the building performs after it's open and running. So it's a really lengthy process. It's not for the faint of heart.
I love how Smuttynose really cares about how they are interacting with the environment. Let's now learn a bit more about the beers that they brew.
We brew a lot of different beers here at Smuttynose. We have 4 different product lines. We have our year-round beers, which include our best-selling Finest Kind IPA. That's the one with the 2 old geezers on it in front of the trailer. Shoals Pale Ale, which was our first beer that came to market in 1994. Robust Porter, which is one of our most award-winning beers. Old Brown Dog, which I think is like our sleeper cult hit beer, is our second bestseller, and it continues to grow every year, despite the fact that no one who talks about beer seems to care much about brown ales. Wunderbar Pilsner, which is our year-round Pilsner that we're in the process of redesigning the packaging for. Baltic Porter and Really Old Brown Dog are 2 beers that have graduated from the Big Beer series. They're available all year long in 4-packs. Big A IPA is available in limited amounts over the course of the year. So those are our year-round beers. They're always available. Our seasonal beers, we have a 5-beer rotation in the seasonal beers, starting in the fall with Pumpkin Ale, which has traditionally been our best-selling seasonal beer. For the wintertime and the run-up through the holidays, we have Winter Ale, which is a Belgian double. Just after the new year, brings Dirty, which is our mid-season beer. It's a big 8.4% super hoppy brown ale. After that is Rye IPA, which is the season that we're currently in right now. That's a nice, chewy, spicy, malty rye beer that we hopped the bejesus out of with Citra hops. We're totally in right now. And then for the summertime, we have a beer called Hayseed. This is the second year we've done Hayseed. It's a 3.8% grisette, which is sort of like a low-alcohol Belgian saison. and that beer is gorgeous. Then we have our big beer series, which we rotate releases every year. Then we have our Smut Labs on, which is where our brewing staff gets to be creative and mad science-y. Which is where our production staff gets to be really creative and experiment with a lot of different ingredients and new techniques. We've had a number of beers graduate from Smut Labs over the years into wider ranges, like our Short Ice series, which we're going to be canning this year.
Some breweries like to keep their beer experiments under wraps until they are ready to release them. Maybe JT will give us a peek behind the curtain.
We have a lot of interesting things going on at Smut Labs right now. I just said that the Short Ice beers, which are our winter Weiss beers, but we age them on different fruits, they've just graduated from Smut Labs up into Smuttynose release. So to fill that vacancy, we have some beers that are longer range. One beer that just debuted about a month and a half ago is called Kisses and Kittens, and it's an entirely barrel fermented Brettanomyces saison. It's only 3.8%. So again, it's low in alcohol. It's really refreshing and delicious, but it takes a long time because we ferment it with the organisms that are in the wood of these barrels. So it's not a quick turn beer. We do some other barrel age releases like the Stallion, which is an imperial stout that we brew at Smut Labs and age in. Its most recent release was red wine barrels. Other stuff we have trialing right now. We've got coffee brown ale in the works, and a number of other Brett beers and saison style beers. Our head brewer at Smut Labs, Charlie Ireland, loves to play around with Brett, so we've got a lot of stuff with Brett in the works.
Now, an important bit of information for all of you at home: where to find Smuttynose beers.
Our beer is available in a wide range of places. Being 21 years old, we've had time to kind of grow out our distribution footprint. Our beers are available in soon-to-be 27 states. We're on the verge of signing on with another state for distribution. I don't know if I can announce it yet, but I think that'll be a cool state to be in because it's got a pretty radically different landscape than most of the markets we're in. And then we're available in 13 countries internationally, not to any huge degree, but we do send beer to the Caribbean, to some places in Western Europe, Spain and Italy, most of the Scandinavian countries, and Germany. We send beer to South Korea. We've done a few shipments to Australia. So we have the ability to sort of get our beer around the world. If anyone at home is curious where they can find their favorite Smuttynose beer, Smuttynose.com does have a beer finder. So if you go to the homepage, you'll see a button that says Beer Finder. That's where the beer finder is. And if you click on that and put your variables, you should be able to find what you need.
And finally, we need to know what JT's best beer memory is.
In 2012, our former director of brewing operations got invited to the UK to participate in a brewery exchange program with the Wetherspoons pub chain. And so Wetherspoons, they've got 700 pubs around the UK and Ireland. And the way the program works is basically they reach out to brewers in other countries who have a good reputation or who they like, and they invite them to the UK. They pay expenses, and they pair you up with sort of a host brewery. So you go over and brew a collaboration beer at one of these breweries, and then Wetherspoons buys the whole batch and sends like 1 or 2 Firkins to each one of their pubs around the country. So I get to go over. We were paired with the Wadworth Brewery in Devizes in Wiltshire, which is like maybe 20 or 30 miles from Stonehenge. It's in a really like scenic. It's like on the edge of the Cotswolds, so it's a really gorgeous area. Devizes is a small town with a lot of history, and we get to go brew beer in this. I mean, the mill alone is this beautiful sort of black painted steel. I mean, it's like everything in this brewery it was just so beautiful to brew and to work on equipment that was this old. The kettle that we brewed in, I think it was a 50-barrel kettle, and it's one of only 2 completely open kettles in the UK. So if you can imagine a 50-barrel vessel with a massive steam coil in it that's maybe like the pipe is 3 inches around, the coil's around, and it's completely open on all sides. And you can sit there and watch this thing boil, and it's like this. It was this perfect mixture of just complete awe at how unusual and cool this was, and the fact that it was just incredibly dangerous. Like, you could totally fall in this and like get boiled alive, instead of having a small manway. And they've got all open fermentation there, and these crazy devices that help harvest yeast. It's one of those things that no matter what brewery you go to in this country, like you'll never see anything quite like that. So I've been fortunate to visit a lot of breweries in my life, but no, I've never seen anything remotely like what I saw in Wildworth. It's pretty damn cool. And they've got like their own Shire horses and their own sign shop where they hand paint these gorgeous signs for all their pubs. They're great hosts as well. I'd like to give them a shout out. Their brewmaster was kind enough to take some time to show Dave and I around. So we went to a couple of pubs in their pub estate, and one of theirs is like the oldest pubs in the UK. It dates back to like the 1300s. And you go in there, and they're like treating you to beer and lunch and all this stuff. And like to go to the bathroom, like the building's so old that you have to walk out of the pub and like through a little yard to like basically like an outdoor bathroom because the building's so old it doesn't have indoor plumbing or space for actual bathrooms. That's probably the coolest beer experience I've had in all my time doing this. They were like funny and embarrassing ones, but that's probably the coolest.
After we ended our interview, JT realized he hadn't even told us about the awesomeness of visiting the Smuttynose campus. So here is a little bit of a bonus for you all.
So you're here at Toll Farm, which is our headquarters. We do brewery tours and tastings 7 days a week. Hayseed Restaurant is open every day of the week with Tuesday for lunch and dinner, and drinks after dinner if you're so inclined. And one of the things that I think is the coolest part, though, is we've got a 9-hole disc golf course here on site. It's completely free, so you can grab your discs, come down, grab a scorecard, go through a quick 9, and then your scorecard's good for discounted food and drink in Hayseed. So we want people to come visit us. We realize that not everyone will want to continue taking brewery tours, so we try to offer a little something for everyone. And then once the weather warms up, we'll be having some events out in the field on the backside of the property. I think we're going to do our birthday party again this year, and then an Oktoberfest in the fall. So we love when people come to visit us and see where the beer comes from. So hopefully everyone will come stop by.
Thank you so much to JT for providing lots of information about Smuttynose Brewing Company. I really get quite geeky learning new things about beers that I've had before. This week, I double dog dare you to go out and find out something new about a brewery or beer that you love. I can't wait to hear it. Tweet at me at GreatBeerADV. Thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you next week. If you all, our fabulous co-adventurers, would like to support the show, check out our Patreon page. For less than the cost of a beer, you can show us some love. Go to greatbeeradventure.com/support. If you want to see even more from our adventures, follow us on Instagram at greatbeeradventure. And be sure to subscribe to the show. That way, you won't miss a thing. Today's episode was produced by Frank Marvici of Marvici Media. Great Beer Adventure is part of the Great Pint Society. Cheers.